Hello and welcome. This is Health Promotion Practices Author Interviews, and my name is Arden Castle. Each episode will explore a recently published article and its author. This week, I am joined by Dr. LaNita Wright, author of Pastors' Perceptions of the Black Church's Role in Teen Pregnancy Prevention, which was published in May 2020. This episode is focused on the findings of her paper, which is just one part of a three-part series with Dr. LaNita Wright. Tune into our other episodes to hear more about her and our other authors. So congratulations, you have recently published an article in May in Health Promotion Practice Journal. For those of us who are not as familiar with the article, can you give us a quick 2-minute summary?
Sure. So the title of the manuscript is Pastors' Perceptions of the Black Church's Role in Preventing Teen Pregnancy. And so this was a qualitative study that was really grounded in systems thinking inquiry framework, which simply means that I'm passionate about how interrelated systems work together in order to influence behavior. So this paper focused on the church and the family system and how those systems work together in order to influence teen pregnancy. So what do churches do? What do families do? And how do they influence one another? So I conducted interviews, semi-structured interviews with 31 pastors in a Southwestern state. And I asked them about the role of their church and, in fact, their role as well in preventing teen pregnancy. And what I found was way more than I thought I would find in this study. So I would just encourage anyone listening to this to actually read the paper, because there's going to be way more than we can talk about right now. But I'll highlight a few of the key themes that really emerged from the field. First of all, parents believe that the Black church should address teen pregnancy prevention alongside parents and congregants. They oftentimes didn't know where to start, but they knew that this should be really an effort where they all worked in concert with one another. And then secondly, they mentioned obstacles. So they talked quite a bit about perhaps resisting parents who may not want this to happen in their church. And then also they talked about discomfort and even talk about some of these sexual health topics, so such as condoms. So not wanting to discuss condoms or contraceptives in a church setting and how that conflicted with their mission and their values as a church community. And then lastly, pastors were honestly willing to partner with other organizations, but they wanted to make sure that their mission and their values really aligned with the church's mission and values.
Excellent. Thank you for that quick summary. And as you mentioned, kind of connecting these two systems, the family system and the Black church, can you explain the role and significance of the Black church to the Black community?
Absolutely. So the Black church system really originated immediately following slavery. And so it's one of the first institutions and trusted institutions that became a staple in the Black community, because this was an organization and really an entire system that was able to advocate for Black people, be a place for Black people to come in a safe manner. Also for them to be able to serve in leadership roles and to learn more about leadership roles, to learn more about policy and political issues, to be able to raise money together, to be able to serve one another together, and to again, just really serve the Black community. And so because the Black church system, this institution, was an immediate staple and partner in the Black community, it almost had really significant roots in the Black community. So that really, not that faith in the Black community originated after slavery, not saying that, because really faith originated prior to the transatlantic slave trade. And there were communities of faith in Africa, especially West African communities. So before enslaved people were brought over, they already were a part of different faith groups. So it's just interesting to see how the passion and the focus on faith has really been perpetuated over time, and to really solidify in institutions within the communities. So that's why you see even now, the Black church system is one of the most trusted, well-recognized institutions in the Black community.
Excellent. Thank you for clarifying that. As you state in your paper, pastors are seen as the gatekeepers, since programming decisions are filtered through them and are implemented only with their permission. What was the first theme that you found after analyzing these interviews? And like you mentioned, the role of the Black church and that pastors would be important to this. So what were you able to find?
So there were, and I'll mention again, that there were so many themes, and really a lot of the themes really touched on the pastor's interaction with congregants. And so one of the major themes that came to mind initially was just their beliefs about the role of the church and how the church really worked together in concert with one another. And so I'll mention just a couple of sub-themes in that area is that, first of all, they really looked at their institution, their church institution, as a place to educate young people. So they felt the weight, the necessity of educating young people in the church setting and being a place young people could go for trusted information. And so they talked a lot about how they knew that they had this responsibility and wanted to make sure they were prepared and equipped to answer questions that young people have. And then they also talked about their expectations of parents and other congregants. So mentioning that it wasn't just on them. So it shouldn't just be left on the pastors to be able to provide that education to young people, but that parents and other congregants should really, again, work in concert with one another to be able to best serve young people in the church setting. So really a family aspect that we all work together, we're all in it together. It takes a village sort of aspect in order to raise a child. And so that really rose to the top and was reiterated over and over again. It takes a village mentality and that we're working in concert with one another.
Excellent. And then kind of on the other side of the coin, what were the pastor's beliefs about the obstacles to implementation? And as you mentioned, this paper is lengthy and has a lot of excellent findings, but are there just a few that you'd like to highlight?
Yes, so I would highlight two main obstacles. There's so many, but I'll start with the first one being parents. So I found it really interesting that pastors mentioned parents as one of their major obstacles because they were really curious about parents wanting their young person to learn from anyone in the church about sexual health issues. And so really there was this push for this should really be in the home, or that parents may want it to be in the home, although the pastors wanted to be involved in the educational process. So one of the hugest perceived obstacles, right? So their perception was that the parents may not want this. And so a part of a separate, within the same study, but it's in a separate paper, I actually talked to parents and asked them about their role and if they would want this to happen in the church. So it was really interesting to see conflicting viewpoints, right? That pastors thought the parents wouldn't want this, but then the parents said, oh no, we want this. We just need to figure out how to say this and how do we approach this to make sure it's done in a way that makes sense, right? And so that was one of the major obstacles, was just trying to understand really them balancing perception and reality, but understanding if parents really would be an obstacle. And then, like I mentioned, there are several others, but I'll also mention older adults just in general, maybe another obstacle that pastors may have to deal with. So maybe the mother of the church wouldn't want this program, or someone else in the church wouldn't want the program because it isn't something that they learned when they were growing up. And so because it wasn't a norm or something that typically happens, then it may be a bit of a struggle to get it approved or to gain that buy-in from other congregants. And then I'll just mention briefly one more obstacle was, again, that struggle with conflicting missions and values. So thinking about what are people going to think if I talk about contraceptive methods, or if I'm talking about sexual health issues in a church setting, what are people going to think about my church? Right. And so pastors struggled with really balancing, again, meeting the needs of their young people, meeting those social needs, but also meeting those spiritual needs, and make sure that they're still in line with their mission and their values, but then that they also meet the needs, the real-time needs and those social needs of the young people.
Interesting. So it sounds like it's a lot of balancing between these perceived barriers and the actual barriers of deviating from what's been traditionally done or taught within the church setting, and thinking about how that plays into the future that they want to see and the expectations of the members.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see, what were the major takeaways from your findings given these barriers and facilitators to change?
Mm-hmm. For me, one of the major takeaways was that, first of all, pastors are absolutely willing to partner with public health institutions and organizations, but it is up to the public health professional to be willing to meet the community where they are. So that means being able to talk to pastors and other leaders about what all do they want to share with their young people, or what do they want to share with their parents and other congregants, and ensuring that they are being respectful of the church's values and their mission, and ensuring that they're meeting their needs. So it's in my opinion, the most important takeaway is that understanding that balance of, while the pastors are on board for the most part, and then in the specific setting, they're on board and they may want to, it's up to the public health professional to be willing to partner and then to be willing to meet them where they are.
I like what you're saying about meeting the public where they are and meeting the communities where they are, because as public health professionals, sometimes we come in with our preconceived ideas of what will work and what we want to work. But if we're not really either tailoring or even listening, then we may miss the mark on really helping the communities achieve the outcomes that they've identified. Those are all the questions for this section. Obviously, go ahead and read that because there are a lot more interesting findings there. But thank you, Dr. LaNita Wright, for joining us today. And thank you all for listening in. If you'd like to find out more about our guest this week, you can reach her here. And as always, follow us on Twitter, LinkedIn, and Facebook for more author interviews. Thank you.